He na mana, he na reo, he rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Jack Boyle tōku ingoa, a hau i te upoko o te ikararo, engari whānau I roto e hirataunga. I used to be able to say awa kairangi, but now I'm in Wellington. Ko rangatira, ko te PPTA te wenga rua a hau mahi ana, engari tuatahi ko te kaya ko a hau. Nau mai haramai delegates, haramai observers, haramai newcomers, haramai old hands. It's fantastic to see you all. For those of you, and I've seen a few, who have been here before, welcome back. And thank you. Thank you for your continued commitment. Ngā mihi nui hoki koutou mahi. For the newbies, it's great to have you here, and I hope you find this a worthwhile experience. I do need to warn you, it's going to be full on. You'll be well fed, well entertained, looked after, but it is a commitment to be here. And taking this time out to do this mahi on behalf of the teaching profession, of your colleagues, of public education, is hugely admirable. Thank you. Last time we met, we farewelled our immediate past president, Angela Roberts. Since then, she and I have swapped roles entirely, and it's good to see that Angela has survived a full 3 terms back in the classroom. The smart money was on that not happening. I won't go into details. I must admit, I'm actually relishing my time out of one. I'll need to unpack that a little later. It's a really good time of year to meet. Spring, a time of renewal and growth, and in Wellington, the brisk winds of change at some stage, perhaps after October the 12th. Luckily for us, our mahi does not rely on the result of coalition talks or special votes. Our work continues. Good shot, eh? Although, let's face it, that work will be easier now that the electorate has washed its hands of Under Secretary David Seymour. There'll be a bit more on the Seymour bucks later in this corridor. This is our time. There are no politicians in sight, apart from on the screen, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who is relieved about that, because the next 3 days are ours. We're going to take stock, we're going to strategise, we're going to prioritise, and we're going to set the direction of travel for our waka, for the secondary teaching profession for next year and into the future. These 3 days matter a lot for us, for our profession, for the children we teach, for their whānau and communities. We bring our expertise, our collective experience, our manaakitanga, our knowledge. We will create policy that makes a real difference. What an awesome opportunity, hey? I started making that difference in 2002. I can't pinpoint to the hour or day every big life decision that I've made, but the day I decided to become a teacher is one I don't think I'll ever forget. I remember it because it was Christmas Day, and I was cleaning up after a big dance party. It was midday, 1 o'clock-ish by the time the last stragglers had left. There were a handful of us cleaning up, having a few quiet drinks. Hospitality, like education, runs on odd hours. I'd spent the last 16 hours or so doing my usual circuit of watching the CCTVs in the office, checking the VIP room to make sure nothing too dodgy was going on, walking the back of the bar down to the door and then doing the same again in a circuit. My friend Josh dropped a whole tray of glasses on the dance floor when it was thick with fake smoke and sweaty out of it people, and you could hardly see your hand in front of your face, and it stunk. I knew 1,000 people, but I didn't really know any of them, if you know what I mean. Cleaning up after them in a stale, dark, stinking bar on Christmas Day, it was Pretty depressing. And it's hard for me to imagine now that that's what I chose to do on a Christmas day. We hosed the floors, restocked the bar, opened the door and pumped up the aircon to try and get the stink out. I checked the state of the toilets and decided to leave them for the paid cleaning staff, and then I decided to become a teacher. Seriously, just like that. I was sick of spending my time cleaning up other people's messes and seeing the results of dumb, bad decisions, including my own. I also knew that I could motivate people. So why not kids? Why not make a real difference, a difference that could last a lifetime, rather than the difference I was making then? One party at a time, one drink at a time. So I did. I became a teacher. I did it because I knew I could help kids turn their lives around. And I did it for the same reasons that I reckon you all did, to make a real difference. I want to talk about some of the things we've done this past year that are making a real difference. We're fighting the power. We're taking an equal pay case to achieve pro-rata non-contact hours for part-time teachers. This case is a challenge that we've been grappling with for the last 16 years, but really, of course, it's about something much bigger. As the lawyer who advised us pointed out, one of the first attempts to legislate for equal pay between men and women was actually in the Treaty of Versailles nearly 100 years ago. This recognised the principle of equal pay for equal work. I don't know if it's heartening to know that we're continuing a fight with such a long pedigree, or depressing that we still haven't solved it. Either way, leading the fight for us are 4 brave members: Leanne, Deborah, Pam and Lisa. And Lisa, are you here today? Can we put our hands together? These women have put their hands up to get a resolution that solves this inequity for them and for the 3,500 part-time secondary teachers. That's hard. But because of the legal mechanics, the case isn't simply against the Ministry of Education, a distant bureaucracy. It has to be against each of their schools too, where some of them have worked for decades. This takes real guts. We acknowledge you. We acknowledge what you are doing. Thank you. At the crux of the PPTA case is a pretty simple but untested legal argument. To prove gender discrimination, you need to compare a group of predominantly female workers with inferior pay and conditions to another group of workers who aren't mostly women and have better conditions, and show that it's a fair comparison that demonstrates the inequity is explained by the gender. So far, so good. Christine Bartlett demonstrated that the law for that works, and won a $2 billion settlement for the female-dominated and chronically underpaid care workers in the aged care sector. She showed us that it can be done. What we're doing that's novel is comparing our part-time teachers, who are over 75% women, to our full-time teachers, who are just over half women. We need to show the court that you don't have to compare a disadvantaged group of mostly women to an advantage group of mostly men. We think we've got a good shot, and it's a principle that matters. We should have a court date in the next month or so watch this space. And meanwhile, if you're in a branch or region with Pam, Leanne, Deborah or Lisa, let them know that we've all got their backs. We're also refreshing and regenerating. We're noticing a really good flow of executive, activists and staff. We have systems in place so that those with the most experience have the opportunity to pass on that taonga of knowledge and skills, and for new people to step up into leadership roles. Every organisation needs a mix of experience and wisdom, youthfulness and enthusiasm. I reckon we do that pretty well. There have been contested elections for executive and regional positions. A number of regions have put in place succession plans, leading new teachers into NETS positions, regional chair roles and onto the executive. We have our first member of the presidential team from Auckland in over a decade. And we've made some fantastic new appointments to positions in the advisory and field service. We're also growing stronger from the ground up. We're growing from the grassroots as well as from the centre, and it makes a real difference to our power as an association. It shows that collectively we're doing it right. Around the country over the last few months, many of you have held election events. Our grassroots engagement around education as an election issue has been truly inspiring. From inviting politicians into the Manawatu Whanganui region, into schools, to well-attended and superbly well-run education panels in Northland, West Auckland, Tauranga, Palmerston North, Lower Hutt, Southland, and probably more. PPTA members have been fabulous advocates for ensuring our would-be politicians and the public hear what truly matters in education. So could you please stand up if your region was involved in a pre-election event? Look at that, homai te pakipaki. Kia ora tātou. I was lucky enough to attend a couple of the regional election debates, and there are a couple of things that struck me. One is how powerfully we advocate for our profession, our schools, our children. We can go toe-to-toe with politicians, and maybe that's not surprising, seeing as our job's about communicating with people who often don't know very much. But the other thing is that it's really true that PPTA is you. You just get on and do the mahi. Now, that ability to organically and locally organise is an enormous strength, and it makes a huge difference for communities to know that what each branch and region does is totally authentic. There's no puppet master at National Office who's pulling the strings. As we move to this post-election period, we can be hopeful that such member-led activism continues to advance what is widely held and deeply felt for teachers, students, and for our society. So that's us over the last year, and now to us for the next. Our annual conference is where we set the direction for the year to come, and this year we have a record 9 papers to consider, so it's going to be busy. There's likely to be some spirited debate. For the first time ever, PPTA Te Wingaroa has a bilingual conference paper. It recommends ways for schools and Māori communities to work together to build collaborative, culturally responsive relations and mana-enhancing partnerships. We believe its approach is timely. Kei pariparingia e te tai, ke monenehu te kura. Though the waves are steep, merely misted are the red feathers. We have a paper on communities of learning, which advocates for a return to the underlying principles that you voted for, because for many of us, our experiences have been hampered by interference, over-engineering, and a lack of real consultation. We will be addressing another set of changes that have infiltrated our schools over the last few years in a paper about flexible learning spaces. The paper points out the lack of evidence around the impacts of FLSs on students, on their learning, on teachers, and it recommends a more professional learning and development approach to support teachers with these changes. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Professional Advisory Officer Dr. Judy Ellison, who, at most recent count, has written 10 papers about NCA. Judy will be retiring next year, and in a generous parting gift has sculpted yet another NCA paper for this year's conference. I think we need to acknowledge all of the work around NCA. This paper is not about how NCA is operationalised at the school level. There are other strands of work for that. This paper is about the design of the NCA and sets out an approach for the NCA review next year. As the pace of change in education increases, we're finding some important things that aren't keeping up. A paper about careers services advocates for appropriate and increased funding and support for teachers and schools. And we have a paper on affirming diversity that calls for more to be done to make schools safe and inclusive places for all, regardless of gender or sexuality. 2 PPTA regions have also brought papers before this conference, one from Waikato that argues for more to be done to support day relief teachers, and one from Canterbury proposing some of the work at the bargaining table next year be focused on developing guidelines around the reasonable endeavour clauses in our collective agreement. Of course, the linchpin paper for this conference is our industrial strategy for the 2018 STCA negotiations. The strategy lays out a path to address the two most serious challenges schools and teachers face: teacher workload and teacher supply. These two strands obviously are intertwined. If the workload is out of balance and the remuneration is unattractive, then recruitment and retention are negatively impacted. As well as endorsing the strategy at the big picture level, we need to grow and build our activism. After this conference and throughout next year, what I'm talking about is building collaborative motivation. Part of the strategy is for you to work directly with your branches to consider and discuss one or two suggestions for our collective claims around supply, workload, and equity. As we work through the workshops of this conference, I ask you to consider not just your own experiences, but also be mindful of the impacts and opportunities for your colleagues in this most critical profession. The kawa of our organisation is to advocate for what is widely held and deeply felt, to make sure that public education and secondary teachers continue to thrive. If we are to be successful in our aspirations, we must get active and work together. We must never forget that our industrial strength is in our numbers. It's as simple as that. That said, the political context, as always, looms large over the work of secondary teachers. We've weathered the storm that was Hekia Parata, with her obsessive targets, her great ideas in the middle of the night, and her sometimes combative stance towards our expertise. Many of you will have experienced Cyclone Hekia right here on our conference floor. Just wow. Newbies, ask one of the old hands in the break. Recently, we welcomed a new minister, Nikki Kay. By far a less controversial and confrontational figure, but definitely not a pushover. To assume that would be a dangerous mistake. And now, of course, we could face a new minister and even a new government. Whether it's a whole new government or just a retread on the one of the last 9 years remains to be seen. What could we face in these scenarios? Well, the best news first. Without Under-Secretary Seymour, there's a very strong chance that ACT's idiotic education ideas will be rolled back. Charter schools and the no less odious but less well-known Aspire scholarships. As with much of David Seymour's intervention in education, the Seymour bucks are absolutely worthless. I've never actually practiced this before, but please, come and get hold of some. Tracy Martin is number 3 on the New Zealand First list, and she's well known to many of you after her regular supportive appearances at PPTA events. She shares many of our policies and will be a staunch advocate in government. But whatever the makeup of the next government, Parliament now has a majority of parties that voted against charter schools and for democratic representation on the Education Council. Importantly, for the wider union movement, Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First are all committed to better pay equity legislation than what's currently before the House. So there's a real chance for some wins in these things. And PPTA is in a position to achieve some of our goals no matter who forms the next government. We hope, and in fact we think, there will be a much slower pace of change over the next 3 years. Continuity and time to bed in recent changes will be welcome. Most of the significant ways in which the school system and teachers are regulated and funded has been pretty consistent for the last 30 years. The fundamentals of tomorrow's schools, the New Zealand curriculum and NCA, and our formula-driven funding system are unlikely to change too much. Something we have seen over the last few years is a public service that's better armed with evidence and data than ever before. With any luck, this will continue. An example of this is how unions in the ministry managed to steer Parata and Kay away from performance pay. This was initially to be part of the plans for the school funding review, as those of you who were at that conference a few years ago will remember. But in more recent cabinet papers, it has been ruled out, with the exception of this lunatic. Another example of the sector and the officials plugging away and making good arguments and eventually getting results is what's been happening between the secondary schools in Christchurch. The plan there to crack down on competitive behaviour between schools, enforcing strict zones and eliminating excessive out-of-zone students is something that's a model we need to encourage politicians to pursue. What I want to emphasise here is that we need to continue looking for the cracks, because that's where the light gets in. Our ideas are able to be advanced and we actually get some wins. A focus on teacher wellbeing from the Minister of Education's commitment at the International Summit of the Teaching Profession is one that I intend to push really hard on in the coming year. Looking ahead further, it's inevitable that the teaching profession is going to face technological disruptions to our working conditions. I don't want to fall into the trap of techno-utopianism or its Black Mirror twin techno-dystopianism. There's no way that teachers will be replaced en masse by robots. The hundreds of millions of dollars that Pearson, IBM, Zuckerberg and Bill Gates are pouring into the area of personalised robo-education does mean that there's a momentum to this that's rolling ahead, and the wave will inevitably wash up here too. Deeply immersive personalised learning experiences, as they're known in some of the literature, are being used already to deliver elements of the curriculum here. Is it an outrage to say that if we play this right, it could be a real liberation for teachers? If basic content in schools skills can be taught and assessed by robot-based personalised instruction, perhaps teachers could be freed up to focus on deep, conceptual, metacognitive affective learning, the front end of the curriculum that we have so little time for now. The flip side, of course, would be if deep, conceptual, metacognitive, affective learning was sidelined, putting teachers in the position of truck drivers today who are facing the reality of driverless vehicles. The response to this has to be that the social, personal and relational elements of teaching and learning cannot be reduced to algorithms. We know it. Parents and students know it. The people who will make the case for robo-education will be politicians looking to save money and capitalists looking to make it. That oh so familiar recipe for disaster. So we know that what we need to do to defeat them is get our arguments straight, organise, collaborate and campaign hard. The American Badass Teachers Association, that's a thing, check it out, says ours is a political profession. Legislators literally decide what happens in our classrooms. We must let them hear from us frequently. This doesn't mean being confrontational. It means sharing what we know to be true from our experiences as experts in the field. It means putting faces to the data. It means standing up for our kids. Our expertise is needed, urgently. You can help. Next year is going to be big. It's the year we're negotiating the Secondary Teachers Collective Agreement, the document that covers most of our members and which sets the bar for all other negotiations, including NZEI's. We're in a strong position in many ways, but we can't take that for granted. If, or should I say when it comes to industrial action, the more of us there are, the stronger we are. We're doing okay. Better than many other unions in New Zealand, but we can't afford to rest on our laurels. Some of our branches have less than half the teachers as members, and many big schools are well below the overall national figure of 70%. To address this, we're developing local organising plans for branches so staff and members can work together on tailored actions for individual schools and regions. You can start now. Who are the non-members in your branch? Have they been asked to join? How many part-timers are there? Are they being paid correctly? Can you campaign to get them pro-rata non-contact time? How many of your colleagues are on fixed-term contracts? Are they for genuine reasons? How are you greeting new staff? Do they feel welcome and want to be part of the PPTA whānau? The other extremely powerful thing you can do is tell your story. When we speak up about our work, about what we see happening in education, when we speak the truth with real stories, we can make a difference. Branch Chair at Manurewa College, Sam Oldham, did just that recently. He wrote about the realities of working in a Decile 1 school. He talked about how he feels to know his students are at the nexus of so many failing systems. When a proud PPTA member takes a risk and speaks out like this, it connects and has power. An authentic voice can change the way we think. So please, tell your stories. Tell them to each other. Tell them in the places they need to be heard. Tell them so that we, together, can make a real difference. E hara taku tō te tō taki, engari he tō taki tini. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, nā mihi nui kia koutou.